Hey everybody, I'm here today with my friend and neighbor Dan Fillius, who has an amazing, amazing vegetable garden. And he's someone who I ask a lot of questions of and enjoy touring this garden almost year round, really, and which is pretty impressive here in Zone 5, Iowa. And so I thought maybe Dan could show us this year what his vegetable garden process is like. And also Dan has a lot of experience professionally. So not only is his home garden amazing, but he has a lot of professional experience working on vegetable gardens. And your current title is kind of a mouthful. Maybe you could tell me.
Sure, yeah. I work for Iowa State University Extension, and I am the field specialist in the horticulture department for commercial vegetables and specialty crops.
So you're helping people who grow commercial growers of vegetables who sell at farmers markets and all other, to restaurants, all kinds of things.
That. I'm excited to take my commercial farming experience and be able to help growers grow better.
Yeah, it's awesome. So let's talk about your own vegetable garden at home. It's a big garden.
Yeah. We have a double lot, and we live right here in Des Moines, double lot. The one lot is entirely our garden, and this was what we were looking for when we were buying. We've lived here for 4 years. My wife's from Des Moines originally, but when we were buying houses, we were like, big yard, and found one, thankfully.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you found one in my neighborhood.
I know, right? But it's about 70 feet by 40 feet.
Yeah, so, but all of the things you do can be done on a much smaller scale too.
Totally.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about how your garden year starts. It starts about, you're planning, it's February right now, and you are starting to work on the plans for this summer's garden,
and honestly,
right?
Kristin, I'm feeling a little behind right now. I'm thinking about when I need to start my my plants, and that is in March usually. And it takes a little bit of time to do the planning, but I've been dreaming about it since the seed catalogs rolled in November. Yeah. And so this is just one that I use, Johnny's, but I'm also usually ordering from any number of them.
Right. Yeah.
But sometimes I get ahead of myself when I'm planning, and I get right into how many row feet of this. But I then need to step back, and I always start with a map, and I do it all on Excel. And so I don't know. I find that when I get to calculating how many seeds I need or how many bed feet equals this, that, and the other thing, that Excel really helps me figure those things out. So I just make a map on Excel so I have it all in the same file. And so this is the map. Each row is I've got it all in rows, and I just block it off. So, and this doesn't have to be in Excel. A person could just draw the map and sketch it out, but that helps me figure out, okay, I've got this much space, it's concrete, the actual space, rather than some abstract thing of a spreadsheet. Right. So it's a
visual picture. I mean, it's a footprint of the garden. Yeah. And then you also take it to a spreadsheet after that. Okay.
Yep. So then I've got each planting on here is a row in my spreadsheet. And I leave space because I print it out afterwards. I leave blank ones for the actual date planted, things like that. Okay. And so I've got a field plan.
Okay. So this is your field plan. So so you have every crop, arugula, cilantro, sassy mix, salad, and then. So you've got the crop, and then you talk about which bed it's in.
Yep, everyone's got a bed. It's days to maturity, so that I can calculate, when I'm going to get that crop, whether it's a direct seed or transplant, the spacing, the rows per bed, because when this all makes sense to me when I'm planning. Right. But then when I get out to the field, and I'm like, or the garden. Yeah. Right. And I am planting it. I often forget in the moment. I'm like, how many rows? So these are just a cheat sheet for me to go out there and plant with. So I'm like, 12 rows. And then I've got this calculation, which is, how many rows and spacing for how many plants per bed foot. And that is what I generate, how many seeds to order from the catalog.
Okay, gotcha.
So it does the calculation
And then
for
this
me.
is how many plants you need.
Yep. and then the number of bed feet ultimately.
Okay.
And then any notes, because there's, it's not all numbers. So something here, I've got, plant at the end next to the following solid succession, or, thin at this point, thin it to 10 inches so that I can.
If there's anything special that, because you have so many different things going on that you kind of.
Yeah, this is a 15-page document, and there's, 20, 30 lines on each page, and it's too much to just keep up here.
But for someone who is doing a smaller garden, this same process would prove useful.
Oh, I think so.
Whether or not you have a lot more to keep track of, but I have, my garden's really small, but this would still prove useful to me too.
I just think do yourself a favor, and help give yourself a plan for the season that you can just follow and execute. When you've got a down moment in February or January. I know some growers the commercial growers, some do this process in December. Because that's when the biggest selection of seeds are available from the seed companies. Anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But sometime in the off season.
So this is your ordering and kind of planning guide.
Yes.
And then you go to your propagation guide.
Exactly. So all the numbers in here, then if the column that says transplant has transplant in there, then all that information goes into this propagation spreadsheet.
Okay.
Which tells me, sorry.
A question for you about transplant. So does this mean that if DS means that it's direct sown in the garden?
Correct.
And so you don't move those to this sheet?
I don't.
These are just the things that you start indoors ahead of time?
Right.
Okay,
I filter it, so it's just the transplants.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yep. And so then you have your list of things that you're going to transplant.
Yep. And then I've got it all coordinated so that things that are being planted in the garden are tray buddies, is what I call them.
Yeah.
So I've got all the things that are planted in the garden in, say, mid to late April are all in the
same
tray number 1. All the things that are planted in mid-May are in tray number 2, so that I can take that tray out and I don't have one singleton row that's left behind to tend in
out of one tray and taking up space on your seed starting stand.
So the planting of it ends up which we'll get into, but when I put them out in the tray, that is staggered. So I might start out with half a tray, but then when it's done and they're mature, they're all out there at the same time.
That makes sense. That's a good tip.
But yeah, so I've got a lot of early flowers. I've got the tomatoes and peppers, all these things that I'm starting in the house. And then through the year, I do a total of 10 trays, but I only have 4 at a time. So I just sort of have it all staggered so that as soon as one tray comes out, the next one's getting seeded and filling in its space. But yeah.
So you said you have room for 10, but you only ever do 4. Oh, you do 10 total trays.
I only have room for 4, but I need to generate the transplants that I want. I have to have a total of 10
So you rotate
trays.
them in and out, which is why you do the tray buddies. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So what are these dates here? Do you decide based on the information here in the field plan and the days to germination and days to maturity, you set your schedule ahead of time for your trays, right?
Yeah. So I start with the date that the date that the crop can handle, and then I make a plan for when it's going to be in the field. I know how many weeks it takes to to be to mature from a transplant, and back calculate, and then that's my seeding date.
Gotcha.
And I've got an equation in here because I had it a couple years back where it was like dates all over the calendar, where it was like a Tuesday, a Thursday, all these things, and we'd be like, oh, I missed this thing. So I just have it, there's a rounding equation in Excel, and I round to the Saturday before, because we're always doing the work on the weekends.
Right.
Because we have
you have full-time jobs, yes. So then you have your weekly to-do list.
Right.
And that is what this is.
Correct. And I've got everything sorted by, like I said, the Saturday, and all the things, all the seed starting, that's down the basement propagation, my direct seeds out in the garden, my transplants need to go out there, and my other tasks, the miscellaneous from the notes, those things, so that I can this is my script for the season, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So this is one from a couple of years ago, I see.
Yep.
And so this is where we can see some of your notes that you wrote to yourself and kind of how things went into the garden.
Exactly.
Every week.
So yeah, I'm moving some tunnels, and end of February, starting my first planting is 12th of March.
Good. Well, we'll look forward to doing some of those things next month.
Sounds great.
Yeah, but in the meantime, why don't we talk a little bit about your seed starting setup.
Great, terrific.
Okay, so there are some supplies you need to get started with seed starting indoors.
Yes, yes.
And I know you have tried a lot of different things over the years.
And I've settled on like
Yeah.
certain things, and because I was a professional grower, I use certain things from like that realm, but it doesn't mean that a home gardener has to use those things.
You can use, there's a lot of different approaches.
Yeah, you could use just a Ziploc Rubbermaid container, you know, to start seeds.
Yogurt containers, anything works.
Anything really
right.
works. Yep, exactly.
Okay.
And so, but you know, we've got our tub of soil here, our media.
This is a seed starting mix.
Exactly.
You always use a special seed starting.
I do. I just said soil, but no,
Uh-huh.
garden soil is actually pretty bad to use.
Yeah,
For,
much too heavy.
It's so
and
heavy.
even potting mix isn't the best, right?
No.
I mean, you really want a seed starting.
Seed starting mix,
Yeah.
exactly. It's most of them are soilless, peat-based, or coconut coir based, and so one time I used garden soil, and I was like, oh, I gotta lighten this up, so I'm gonna add sand to it. And it ended up just as concrete. It was so bad. It was so bad.
Lots of experience.
So this is a small 6-pack right here that, but a person could use a 20-cell tray like this one right here, or these are called wind strip trays. This is what a lot of commercial growers are moving over to, and they are available. You can buy them by the one. They are kind of pricey.
They're heavy duty.
And they are very heavy duty. They last years and years and years.
And whatever tray you use, you always put it in another tray that has no drainage,
Exactly.
right?
So this one, yeah, that you can water it, and then the water collects in here, and then after the plants are, or the media is saturated, you can then dump the rest of the water.
Dump the extra.
These things
right.
fit just right inside there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Because they have holes in the bottom. So you just poke your finger up through when you're ready.
And this, these things are called 10-20 trays because they're 10 by 20 inches more or less. Or is it centimeters? I think it's inches.
Yeah. Looks like inches.
I think so. Yeah, it's got to be. All right, so you want to fill your tray here, and then I usually settle it down like that.
So you don't smash it down.
I don't smash
top.
it down.
Yeah.
It needs some air in there. But then I make a little dibble for my seeds to go in, and I drop the seeds in. I've got some old spinach seed here that I'm just gonna put in. And you know, this is older seed, so I'm going to just put, you know, it had 90+% germination at the time that it was delivered to me. But I'm going to put 2 or 3 seeds in each hole.
Just in case.
Just in case.
Some don't germinate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is, you know, going to mean more. If they all do come up, it's going to mean some thinning for me. But
when you thin, do you pull or do you snip?
I snip.
Yeah.
If you pull, you can pull, but you do risk uprooting the one you want.
Right. So
So
you could
snipping really
damage the
is.
roots.
And if it's done small enough, you can just do it between your fingernails.
Just
It's not
snap
hard.
it off.
Yep. And then after that, I will just top these off with some soil. And I keep saying soil, don't I? And then I'm just going to leave these last two, and I would use media for this spinach, but some seeds, if you read the seed packet or the instructions, say they need light to germinate or leave uncovered.
Surface sow.
Surface sow. And so in those ones, I like to use, you know, I leave it as shallow as possible. My dibble wouldn't be as deep also. But then I sprinkle a bit of vermiculite over the top, and that lets, you know, that will get, once it gets wet, it's gonna really distribute, and it's gonna be just shallow there. And this vermiculite, in my opinion, leaves more light to getting through.
Okay, so in something that says, you know, sow shallowly or sow on the surface of the soil, you actually don't leave it just open to the air and light. You do put vermiculite over it.
Right, because I have found that one could use, if you don't have vermiculite, you could just sprinkle a little soil over there.
But just a tiny bit.
Just a tiny bit, yeah. Because when you're watering, they're gonna get suspended in water. They might splash out.
Yeah.
Leaving it purely open
is,
I think, a recipe for disappointment.
Yeah, and so are there certain? I'm trying to think of what seeds that would apply to.
Oh, lettuce is one of them that says it wants to, and then many of the flowers like snapdragons. A good rule of thumb is a seed wants to be buried 2 times its longest dimension. So like a pumpkin seed, which is, maybe this big,
okay.
would go 2 times that deep, 2 times that much soil. A snapdragon, which is like dust, is just going to be on the surface, maybe.
So so you can almost just assume the smaller the seed, the more the closer to the surface.
Yeah.
You would sow it.
And it's, the light requirement is not directly track with that. So there's certain physiological things that certain plant families need, but related to light. But but yeah, the depth. That's a good rule of thumb.
That is a good rule of thumb. That's helpful. Okay, so you've sown the seeds.
Yep.
What other supplies do you need to kind of be successful?
Right away, before I forget, this is I make an Excel spreadsheet so I don't forget throughout the year. But it's easy for me to forget in 10 minutes what it was that I last put here.
Yeah.
So before I go any further, I'm going to go in and I'm going to use a tag. And so I'm going to write the date. I'm going to write what it is. This is Corvair spinach. And then I just put it right in there.
Okay, so always well marked.
Yeah, and this is one type of tray tag. I also might use wooden ones that are like little popsicle stick type. A lot of other people like to put masking tape right on the side.
So it doesn't have to be anything fancy.
Yeah, and one pro tip that I just learned for the folks who are using masking tape, instead of using a pen, they're using a number 2 pencil. And the number 2 pencil will not wash off when it's watered.
Oh, interesting.
And it doesn't fade. So also, if you use a masking tape like this, you can write, if you've got different things in this row, this row, this row, you can write what it is on each one right there.
That's true. It's very flexible. Super easy to use.
Yep.
Easy to find,
And
too.
still other people use like a grease pencil to write on the side of these things.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways. It's just you just need to mark.
Exactly.
Whatever you use, just mark what you've sowed, because it seems so easy to remember, but
Exactly.
not necessarily.
So then plants need, so then we're going to water these things in, and we've got our tray here that, can hold that. At home, I'm using a bigger setup, which and we can look at that in a sec. But yeah, you're going to just take your for plants, for small seeds that are on the surface, misting with either a spray bottle, or if you've got a one of these pistol things that's got a mister setting on it, you can mist that. There are specific little screw-on mister attachments for hoses.
I have one of
Any
those.
of those things, just to mist it, get it wet. I neglected to mention that this media was nicely pre-moistened beforehand.
So don't start with dry.
No, that's
seed starting mix.
Yeah.
Have it just moist.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be able to wring it out and see water,
Nope,
but
it should stick together.
Yeah, just nice like that. That makes sense.
Yep.
And then when you were misting the tops of these, would you also put some water in the tray in the bottom so that it could soak up some moisture from the bottom as well?
It's not as important for those seeds because they are right on the surface.
Right.
But it is helpful to keep it from drying out, to give it some reserves of water. So yeah,
Okay.
I do usually put some water in the bottom as well. And then for the other ones, just watering from the top with a watering can. That's
Something pretty gentle.
Yes, exactly.
A gentle
Because
stream.
even though may not be small seeds, they can still bounce out if it's if there's clogged holes in the rows or too much.
So it's just important to keep everything kind of settled as much as possible. Let the roots get established. So what about lighting?
Yeah, of course. So many people have taken their trays and set them on the windowsill, and most people end up being disappointed with that.
It's just not enough light.
Or the plants end up being disappointed,
Yeah.
and you don't realize it. What often happens is they'll germinate and they'll just try to get to the light, and they'll stretch, and you end up with these tall, lanky seedlings.
Yeah.
And some people plant those, but often that will lead to a sick plant or one that's too tall and spindly, and then it falls over under its
It
own
just
weight.
doesn't ever.
It doesn't, and you maybe could plant it deeper, but then more connection or more contact with the soil on that little stem ends up leading to maybe more disease. So. Good, sturdy transplants are the way to go, and the most tried and true way to do that is to get some grow lights.
Okay.
So we've got a grow light set up right over here. And you'll notice right off the bat that this light is really low and that I have to snake that thing under there.
Right.
It's important to have these lights when the plants are very young as close to the tray as possible.
Okay.
If you wait for them to come up for you to start seeing them, it's too late because they're already going to be stretching towards that light. And with a shop light, which a lot of people are using, just an old shop light, T12 lights, these things are not bright enough they're brighter than being on the windowsill, but they're not bright enough unless they are right down low.
So they just need to be almost touching the plants.
Exactly.
Right.
They're not like a hot incandescent light that's going to burn.
So there's no concerns there.
But these shop lights need to be right there, and then as your plants grow, you raise them up. And this is a kind of a nice setup because it just, you raise it up and there's
that's really handy.
It just like you can put it
but
down.
But a normal shop light, sometimes people have them on chains, and you can do it with hooks and
little
chains.
Hooks on the chains.
I mean, there's all sorts of ways to do it. But
Exactly.
This is convenient, this setup.
I went to the local hydroponic grow shop, and they have a lot of supplies for these, and they have these little clip-on things that are ratchet that you can just raise them over. Also, this aftermarket. You don't need this whole thing.
Right. Okay. Because you can do that just on your whatever shelf.
Right.
That you have.
And I'm using a baker's rack, one of those wire rack ones. I've got about this much space between my shelves so that I can, because when I'm watering and working in these things, I lift it up,
space.
I do the work, I put it back down.
It's convenient.
Yeah, it's kind of nice.
So this is a T12 light, but then you can also get other kinds that are even.
You can, yeah. So the ones I use are a T5, which even though it's a smaller number, it might seem counterintuitive, but it's a much more intense light. Also counterintuitive, it's a much smaller diameter. It's like the diameter of the light is like my index finger.
So it's really.
But they're much more intense, and it's a bank of 8 lights that fit across the whole tray here.
Okay.
So the other thing that I would caution is that you want lights to they don't spread out very much. So for this whole tray here, if we were to have this whole thing planted, you would need more than just these 2 bulbs on this fixture. This would be good for this little guy right here, but the ones out here would stretch towards that light.
There's no, is that called the halo, or is it called something like that?
There is a term, but
there's no, it doesn't go out. It's just whatever is directly beneath the light is what it is helping.
Right.
Okay, that's good to know too.
Yeah. So so this is great for this, and I've got it all watered in, and this right here would be good for germination. This is a dome that goes over the top and would keep the humidity.
You'd seal
Trust
it up.
me, it fits.
Right. You'd seal it up over there.
Yep.
Right.
And that keeps you from having to babysit it and keep watering it until it germinates. Once it germinates, depending on the crop, you could take this off or leave it on.
Okay.
But
always before the plant gets to the top of the dome.
Before that, you'd take that off. Yeah, it's really just to keep it nice and moist for germination.
Okay.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
So I'll
take
to
that.
you. And then you would just continue as the plant grows, raise it up, water it. I usually water, I check every morning. And I have a fan, one of those clip-on fans, to blow across, because that helps both with keeping it from being waterlogged, and also when a plant feels that wind on it, it will become stronger and more stocky.
So it helps it helps harden the seedlings off to go outside where
Exactly.
they'll be experiencing those conditions.
Yep. So having that light right low keeps your plant short and stocky, which is actually what you want.
Yeah. So short and stocky, and then also strong because of the fan. So you don't have it on a very high setting, I'm assuming, though.
No.
Just like the lowest setting almost.
Exactly.
But it's just enough and it doesn't dry things out too much.
No, it doesn't. We last year we had a box fan, which is a lot bigger, and that did not dry things out too much. We watered every morning. With our I neglected to mention, this is just a bigger water catchment thing and we can fit 4 trays side by side in here and bottom water that way as well, like we were talking with this. And
this tray right here holds 4, or this bigger tray holds 4 of these types of trays.
Yes, the ones that are the 1020s.
Right, the 1020s. And so this is what you have going at any one time. You would have just this one tray with 4 of these in it. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And backing up, there's one more thing that I neglected to say about lights, and that is this other type of fixture, which is LED. You know, the price is coming down a lot on these things, and they last a lot longer lifespan than the fluorescent bulbs do. And so this is an all-in-one system right here that you can just plug in, and is going to have a good spectrum, is going to have good intensity for these plants also. And LEDs are not hot typically, like an incandescent, so more like a fluorescent.
So are all seed starting LED lights the same, or
No.
there's a lot of different ratings on them?
There are, and it's you know, I'm not the expert at that to go into it, but I would, it's going to be better than a windowsill.
Right.
Pretty
Gotcha.
much.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
exactly.
Great.
And one last thing is they make these sort of halfway in between. It's a LED bulb that fits into a fluorescent fixture.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so that's somewhere in between that you could do.
Right.
And one might be asking, how long do I have my light on?
Right.
And I have mine on for 16 hours a day.
Okay.
Some people go with 12, but I think 16's better. And so you just plug your light into the timer. Yep. And I usually, mine are in my basement, and it's colder in the basement. The lights do give off some warmth, and so I usually set it to start at 2 a.m. Coldest part of the of the night.
Try to heat it up a little bit.
Exactly. So
Okay.
and then they're on for 4 hours there till 6 a.m. and then they're off in the evening. So yeah, a timer's a good cheap thing to add on to.
So that's helpful, and then you don't have to keep. I mean,
Turning
you
off
check
and on,
check them every day anyway for
I
water,
do.
but it's just the more you can automate,
Exactly.
the easier.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good.
And then one last thing that I add in here, and it's hiding underneath, is a heat mat. And this is a big one here, but they make them smaller as well for just a single tray.
Yeah.
But this is really another thing that is really essential, especially if you're in a cooler place. It warms the soil to 75, 80 degrees. They make them with thermostats so that it's not baking your poor little crops. But I find that when I'm first starting my lettuces, even those cool season crops will benefit and come up much more reliably with higher percentage of germination if I've got it set there. But this is essential really for the tomatoes and peppers and things that we love.
All the warm
the things we love to grow, right?
So so do you use that on everything then, pretty much?
Pretty much, yeah.
And just only when it's germinating, right?
Yeah.
Once you see green,
yes,
turn it off.
Yeah, that's the essential. For me, with 4 trays that are going like all at different times, where I've got this one starting, but these ones older, they all end up being on that, and I've got the big mat. But if you had just one small mat, you could rotate it around.
True.
Exactly.
Okay.
You don't need it to be the big mat.
And for example, how far back from when you are putting transplants in the garden are you typically starting seeds? Like, what's the earliest you start seeds?
Yeah, probably some crops take longer than others, and the brassica crops, the cole crops, those are about 30 days, so 4 weeks.
Okay.
Same with lettuces.
Yeah.
Tomatoes are 5 or 6 weeks. Peppers are a little bit longer than tomatoes, and it also depends on how big your the plug size is for the plant.
Okay.
If you want that plant to be able to pull nicely and be fully rooted into that media, the smaller the plug size, generally the faster it is to be ready.
I never thought about that.
So I will sometimes. This is a 72 cell tray right here, and this is a 128, meaning how many cells there are in there.
Yeah.
You can see these are bigger.
Right.
And a lot of growers will grow, professional growers will grow tomatoes in one of these, or 50, or even a bigger thing. But I put them in my 128, and they're ready 2 to 3 weeks earlier.
And you put them in the garden just small, even still, you don't move them up to a bigger.
I don't.
A bigger.
One could. Certainly, and in fact, we've got a nice tray here. This is a 20 row, and people will sometimes just load these with all my tomatoes of one type in here, and then as soon as they germinate, they
break them all apart.
Tease them apart, plant them into a bigger cell,
right.
And then they get a lot of them. Yeah, you can. So if you've got just a small heat mat and you want to get a lot of tomatoes and peppers started, you could just have them all start here, germinate, and then you could put them into this, and they wouldn't need the heat mat anymore.
I see. Okay. Interesting. So, so you can as these are these what, an inch and a half or an inch or so
Yeah. Yep.
across? And so those can go in the garden, or
Yes.
you can move them up into a little bit bigger pot.
Exactly,
Let
like-
them grow on for a while,
Yep.
and then put them into the garden.
Into something
this
like a
size.
6-pack or
Right,
something big,
right.
or a 4.5-inch.
But it
pot.
just takes more time. The bigger the cell,
Yep.
the more time before you can put it in the garden. So you start
Exactly.
things about 4 to 6 weeks before you
Generally.
plan to put them in the garden, generally, and also in succession. You don't start everything at once. You're starting,
Exactly.
as we talked about your planning system earlier.
Yeah.
And so you've got it all down to a sort of like a well-oiled system here.
I think so.
Machine.
And we'll look more into that as the year goes on, huh?
Well, I look forward to talking to you more about it all year and watching everything grow.
I'm excited.
Thanks.